Hi, I wanted to talk a little bit today about the economics of basic supply and demand and how that connects up to accounting profits versus economic profits and the connection to transfer pricing. But this first video is going to be very short and just talk a little bit about the basics of supply and demand. So let's go ahead and talk about what we get when we have a demand curve. Now you see here I've drawn a quadrant with price in the vertical axis, quantity on the horizontal axis, and the demand curve, which is a downward sloping line. And you can think of this as the demand curve in the industry. And basically consumers, as the price of something falls, would be willing and able to want to and would buy more of something. And hence the demand curve has a downward slope. As price goes down, the quantity demanded by consumers is going up. Now, that alone doesn't tell us much, but if we add in a supply curve, then we can see here that the supply, and this again in the industry, it says that at any given price, there's a certain amount of quantity that will be supplied in the marketplace, and it would be upward sloping. As the price is going up, more and more supply would come online, become available. And it's exactly where those two lines intersect that we're going to reach a market equilibrium, where at that price, the amount demanded by consumers would exactly equal the amount supplied by the suppliers. And at that equilibrium, we'll see that there's a fixed price is going to be set. We're going to know now what the price is by looking to the looking to the vertical axis. And we look down at the horizontal axis. We say this is the quantity that would be produced and consumed in equilibrium. Now that's all looking at this really from the perspective of an industry. But we want to talk about what happens if you're in an industry which is characterized by perfect competition. And in perfect competition, you can see this graph on the right-hand side of your screen. I've drawn what the demand curve looks like to a competitive firm. And the reason why that demand curve is now a flat line is that in perfect competition, where there are many buyers and many sellers, and everyone has perfect information, it's impossible for any one individual buyer to sell at anything or seller to sell at anything greater than the market price, because all the buyers would say, I don't have to pay that price. I'm going to pay the price that exists in the marketplace because there are plenty of suppliers out there willing to sell at that price. So demand to any one individual firm looks like a horizontal line. They can sell whatever quantity they want at that market price. How much they will sell will depend a great deal upon their own supply function, which is essentially defined by their marginal cost curve. This is the additional cost of making the next unit of output. And so since every unit of output I sell, I'm going to get the equilibrium price, I will make output and I will sell it up until that last unit I sell exactly would equal the marginal cost of producing it. So we'd see an equilibrium there for the firm level, which would tell us essentially what quantity the firm would produce given the price that's been established in the marketplace. Now let's bring in what their average cost curve is going to like, and I'm going to draw it in the equilibrium position. That essentially in equilibrium, the average cost curve, that U-shaped curve, which usually starts off high and comes down because there may be some efficiencies or you're being able to spread your fixed costs over a larger number of units, but eventually starts turning up because of the diminishing returns on various approaches to producing things. And essentially that average cost curve is exactly touching the demand curve for this individual firm, and it's at the point where the marginal cost curve crosses through the low point. And at this particular point, what you would see is that we have an equilibrium for the firm. The price is exactly equal to the marginal cost. The price is equal to the average costs. There are no economic profits. There is no economic profit in this situation, but there is an accounting profit. And we'll talk about that a bit more in the next video. But essentially, at this point in the equilibrium, this particular firm is essentially breaking even from an economic point of view. From an accounting point of view, that would mean there's enough profit to reward the party who put their money at risk and invested in running this business. So this is that equilibrium position, and everything is stable. Now, what makes this interesting, what we're going to do in transfer pricing, is talk a little bit about what happens when there are shocks to the system. So let's start off by looking at a shock to demand in the industry level. As you see here, I've drawn another demand curve. This one's in red, and I've called that D prime. And at that new demand curve, and you can think about anything that might have created a shock that would increase the demand for your product. It may be that that your product is corn, and that there's been a crop failure of other grains that increases the demand for corn, pushing your demand out. Your supply curve hasn't changed. It's just increased demand for your product. And you'll notice now that D prime is intersecting the supply curve at a different point. It's got a higher price and a higher quantity demanded. That higher price is P prime in this example, and you can see the quantity demanded is Q prime. Now, that's going to have an impact over here on the individual firm. So I'm going to take that off. You can see here that the new demand curve that the individual firm is facing is now, again, it's horizontal because it's perfectly competitive. It can't affect the market price, but it's now higher. And at this new higher level, the demand curve, which denotes where the price is actually above the average costs. This new situation where we have the price is higher than the average cost means that there's actually going to be an economic profit earned for this firm. And in this case, that economic profit is going to have, it's going to exist at least in the short run, but in the long run, in a perfectly competitive situation, when firms see that some other firm is earning an economic profit, this will tend to cause new firms to enter into the industry. And the impact of that is likely to have an impact on moving the supply curve and bringing down the price and or bidding up some costs in a way that will eliminate that short-term economic profit. In our next video, we're going to take this information about how shocks are affecting things and then link it back to how we're measuring profitability both from an accounting sense and an economic sense. Thanks and have a great day.